Happy Sunday, and welcome to Southern Gospel Sissy. I'm Justin Ryan, and I'm excited to share a song with you from my upcoming album, Southern Gospel Sissy. The song is called Turn It Over to Jesus, originally sung by the Rex Nelon Singers. This, along with all 18 songs, will be available on all digital musical platforms later this month. The phrase, turning it over to God, is common amongst Christians. But what does it truly mean? Do we expect immediate favorable outcomes? And how do we handle what follows? A recent article I read emphasized that God encourages us with the message, "Trust me, I've got this." While this is uplifting, it can lead to unrealistic expectations. We often assume that God's intervention means everything will go our way, but the reality is different. Sometimes we don't receive what we hope for. And all that does is leave us to question God's faithfulness. If we believe that surrendering our problems guarantees a positive outcome, we may feel responsible when things don't go as planned. This can lead to a crisis of faith, causing us to doubt God's love. Often, though, well-meaning encouragement from others exacerbates these feelings, especially when those folks have seen positive results from their faith. The real challenge, though, is not in trusting God, but in the misconceptions that arise from these expectations. I faced my own struggles with anxiety and depression, and I understand the profound desire for relief. While we often expect our prayers to be answered as we envision, it's essential to remember that all prayers are answered, even when the answers don't align with our desires. The true lesson is about our dependence on Jesus. We are not meant to save ourselves. God's grace is what brings salvation. What we think of as love or perfection may not match God's vision for us, which often diverges from our own expectations. For years, I even asked myself, why me, about my struggles. But shifting my perspective to what can I learn from this has been transformative. God offers us a miracle in the form of inner peace, which can sustain us through life's turmoil, whether it be a job loss, health challenges, or personal crisis. This peace is the greatest miracle. Life doesn't always unfold as we hope. Sometimes we find unexpected blessings in what initially seems like misfortune. As a child, I clung to Matthew 7 through 11, believing my prayers would always be answered. Even now, I struggle to maintain that faith in difficult times, but I remind myself that Jesus is the Son of God, and I hold on to my faith amidst uncertainty. In 2023, I faced a life-altering challenge when my husband Scott was diagnosed with stage 3C colorectal cancer. He passed away just a year and a half later in my arms. And during that time, I grappled with hope and despair. Initially, his treatment showed promise, but ultimately, we transitioned to hospice care, and I was left questioning why it had to happen that way. In the face of such loss, do we abandon our faith? Jesus modeled for us the importance of maintaining faith, even in our darkest moments. The story of Peter walking on water in Matthew 14:22 through 33 is a powerful example. When Jesus called Peter to step out of the boat and walk on the water, Peter initially obeyed, demonstrating incredible faith. Yet, when he saw the wind and the waves, he began to sink, crying out for Jesus to save him. Jesus immediately reached out, saying, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" This passage teaches us that even when we falter in our faith, the key is to keep our eyes on Jesus. We may face storms that threaten to overwhelm us, but by focusing on God, we can rise above them. Like Peter, we must recognize our need for Jesus and trust that He will lift us when our faith wavers. With Scott, I choose to cherish our nearly 11 years together rather than focus on his passing. Those moments of care brought us both peace amidst our own struggles. One night, reflecting on my own life, I even asked God if it was my time to go home. I didn't receive a clear answer, but I understood that surrendering to God means finding peace in whatever God's plan is. Psalm 23 reminds us of God's guidance through life's darkest valleys, assuring us that we are never alone. And as Paul shares in 2 Corinthians 1:3-11, we are meant to share the comfort we receive from God with others. True comfort does not come from getting what we want. It comes from surrendering to God's will and finding peace in God's perfect plan. Ultimately, to walk on water, we must focus on what truly matters. Happy Sunday. If your life's oppressed and you feel alone, just remember this: God's still on the throne, and there's nothing that He cannot do. There's no mountain too high, He won't move it for you. See, He is waiting now, as He's done before. He wants you to take that step. Just open up the door. Oh, turn it over. Just give it to Jesus. Turn it over to the Lord. If the things in life that you've loved the best have all faded away and they failed the test, if the friends you love who said they'd be true but they left you alone, they really don't care about you, but there is one true friend I'd like to recommend. He said that He'd be there when you reach the end. Oh, turn it over. Just give it to Jesus. Turn it over to the Lord. Why don't you give it to Jesus? Give it to the Lord. Let Him take control. Why don't you give it to the Lord? Give it to the Lord. See, there is nothing, nothing too big for my God to do. Nothing too low, nothing too high, nothing too deep, nothing too wide, nothing too big, nothing too small, nothing too weak, nothing too strong. Turn it over to Jesus right now. Don't delay. Turn it over to Jesus. Give it to the Lord. Why don't you give it to Jesus? Turn it over to Jesus. Wrap it up and give it to the Lord. Turn it over to Jesus. Let Him take control. Give it to the Lord. Why don't you give it to